news and sports and feature photography, but I really love shooting portraits. And even when I was doing a lot of sports action, as much fun as it is being sidelined at the at a Super Bowl, and believe me, it is. What I really loved doing was having an hour with the athletes one on one, where I was really shooting something unique, and we were connecting. So as I realized that's what I wanted to do more of. Magazines kind of seemed the route, and in the one absolute complete abuse of winning a Pulitzer, I was able to parlay um, the trip up to New York to pick one up into getting in the door to see a lot of magazines, which was kind of the one time you can get by with using the line, "Hey, I'm in town to pick up a Pulitzer. Can I stop in with my book?" So it's sort of like being related to somebody really famous. It gets you in the door the first time, but then you have to deliver the goods after that. But that was my way into magazines, and really like the last 6, 7 years that I was working in newspapers, I was shooting magazines on the side, and it was kind of the best of both worlds, where I'd go off for the Miami Herald to cover turmoil in Haiti, and fly back on weekends or vacation time, shoot for Rolling Stone or Sports Illustrated. So it was a good chance to do everything that I love to do.
And at what point when you started doing the portraiture did you start using the big lights and the soft boxes and the beauty dishes? Was that something that you kind of learned on your own?
It was kind of gradual a step up. The second newspaper that I worked for out of college was the Orange County Register, and virtually everything we shot was in color. And unlike shooting for National Geographic, you can't wait for the light to be beautiful to shoot your photographs. If you've got a portrait shoot at high noon, you've got to make it look good. So way back then, shooting with sort of the entry drug into strobe photography, the gateway drug, the Norman 200Bs, if any of you still remember those things, battery powered strobes that we'd set up everywhere. And it was kind of an evolution from that to the bigger packs to the Profoto that I'm using today. But really, a lot of the fundamentals are the same. They just were not quite as heavy back then.
Right, right. I like the title of this slide because I guess even when you're taking a portrait, you are essentially trying to tell a story in one frame or two frames of that person.
Yeah,
And
it's a
you
lot.
kind of have a bunch of ideas of how to approach that.
Yeah, I mean, really going back to the roots, I'm no longer by any stretch a photojournalist, but even as a even as a portrait photographer, one of the things you really need to do is pay attention to what's going on, and make a connection with your subjects. That kind of goes back to what I was saying in terms of why I liked making the move to magazine portraiture from news photography. Is I liked making that connection instead of standing back and being a fly on the wall and not getting involved. I like the involvement. So, one of the first things I really needed to do is learn how to approach people and make them comfortable. And that's really what I do to this day. It doesn't matter if it's someone on the street or a famous celebrity. It's you have that opportunity to find out something about their life.
So these photos that we're going to look at here are kind of interesting in that these are obviously not movie stars. These are people from a trip, presumably to India, that you took.
Yeah, this is Kathmandu. They actually could be movie stars in the future. We'll have to see if what happens for them. But I think kind of back to the last slide. One of the things is really you want to treat everybody as though they're a star. I love when I'm going on vacation, connecting with different people, and these are the holy men of Kathmandu. So um, when I travel, of course I shoot scenics when I see stuff, but what I really really love doing is doing portraits when I'm on the road, and I think it's a great way to kind of hone your skills and go off and shoot what you love to shoot.
When you're in a situation like this and you haven't been assigned this and you're in a foreign country and the subject may or may not speak English or you may or may not speak their language, what's sort of the process of approaching these people and saying, hey, I'm a photographer because, since everyone's a photographer, how do you differentiate yourself? Are you showing them your work to sort of make it legitimate or?
Mostly, I just smile a whole lot. I do find that even in a lot of foreign lands, people speak more English than you would think. But more than anything, I kind of smile, motion to the camera, and the wonderful thing today is this is no longer a case of I want to take a photograph of you, and when I get home, I'm going to develop this, and I'll look at it, and it'll be really amazing, and I'll be sure to drop some in the mail. The great thing today is on the LCD on the back of your camera, it's as you're shooting something, you're showing somebody what photographs of them, so they kind of become a part of the whole process.
We always get the question, which is when you're walking on the street and you're taking pictures of people, are you trying to get model releases at the time, or you really see this as kind of your personal project, more of like an art project than anything else?
Yeah, if I was really smart, I probably would be, but for the most part, I'm really not looking to put these people in a Microsoft ad. They're kind
Right.
of personal photographs and use them for lectures and things like this. But you know, I'm I'm not looking to release a lot of stock in most of these instances. It's just a case of going off and coming back with wonderful memories of the trip.
Um, Going to Nepal to capture the holy men is one thing, but you're kind of forced to look at any location that you're assigned to shoot in, and how do you find compelling scenery or background in anything that you're looking at?
Well, I think ideally you get there early to scout. On some of the bigger budget shoots, certainly anything for Vanity Fair, there's a budget to send out a location scout in advance, but it's actually something I really love doing myself because location scouts are really, really good at what they're doing, but they rarely get calls to, check the alleyway behind the location because most people don't think to shoot there. And to me, I could be just as likely doing a portrait shoot behind a building, sort of in the catacombs of a sports arena as I would in the middle of where you would expect. So I try to get there as early as possible. Sometimes that means I fly in the day before and scout the location to figure out where we're going to shoot. Other times that really isn't possible. You're told you can get there an hour too early, and you shoot and try to find the best thing. There are situations where I know a week in advance, and I've got X amount of time, like shoot wherever you want, but you got an hour to do it, and you kind of have to work in terms of whatever travel time you do comes out of your shoot time. But a lot of times it's worth, if you've got an hour, it's worth moving your subject 15 minutes to a better location and shooting a good picture for half an hour than shooting endlessly in a boring spot for a full 60 minutes.
And what percentage of the time do you get to control kind of, the golden hour shooting with a nice light versus, okay, it's midday, this is when he's free?
Yeah, pretty much I would say almost, well, never. I wish it was more often. I can't tell you the number of times the subject assistant or publicist or manager and I are speaking, and it's sort of, well, when would you like to do the shoot? It's like, could we shoot really, really early or really, really late in the day? And they're like, I've got 11:30 to 12:30 open. So it's like, well, gee, 11:30 is not really that early, and 12:30 is really not that late. So
Yeah.
it really comes back to those days in newspapers where it's just learning to make it look great, even if the light doesn't that you're what you're handed.
So we have some images here of Richard Branson, who is one of the world's most wealthiest men and one of the world's probably more eccentric characters. Um,
An
I
all-around
love these.
coolest. Yeah,
Yeah, no, he's totally cool, right?
yeah, yeah. This from an absolute dream shoot for Time magazine, where really my whole pitch on this thing from the photo editor at Time was Richard Branson in a spacesuit on his private island. I mean, really, as a pitch goes, you know, you really can't top that. That's obviously a pretty great thing. But on top of it, Richard is just a wonderful subject who himself recognizes what's a great pitch and goes along with it. So these were a couple of pictures that we actually did very early in the morning on, believe it or not, this is Christmas Eve morning on his private island, Necker Island in the Caribbean. And this was a Time magazine story on Virgin Galactic space flights. So he agreed to wear this spacesuit that we got from a prop house in LA. I think this was from Apollo 13 or something like that. I'm
Wow.
not positive which movie this is from, but that's how you get a spacesuit before one exists. Is you go to Hollywood.
So what was there was a discussion beforehand that, hey, why don't you put this on, or did you show up and say, we have this spacesuit for you?
That's kind of a good one to discuss beforehand because that can be a big oops if you don't. As I said, R Richard really is truly fantastic, and he heard the pitch and he loved the idea. So we'd already kind of signed off on that. And believe me, getting the spacesuit down there was that was by far the star of the shoot in terms of logistics. Richard and I were sort of background players compared to the spacesuit.
Hmm.
It does take a lot to get a space suit, particularly a big space helmet, down to the middle of the Caribbean. But he's signed off on it. Again, go in the day before to scout locations and make the plan. And we just shot as much as we possibly could. The picture on the left I kind of liked because this is the rocks near his boat dock that we took off from. And as I was scouting it, I was just kind of thinking it sort of looks like Mars, so he could kind of be the first astronaut on Mars. But
Right.
um, obviously the atmosphere there is very good. You don't need a space helmet.
And in terms of these locations, did you have them for several hours so you were able to move around, or is the beach photo pretty close to this little rock outcrop?
They're actually pretty close. Richard was absolutely cool and would have gave us all the time we wanted. I was kind of conscious of the fact that spacesuit, even in December in the Caribbean, is pretty bloody hot. So we gave
Yeah.
him a break, which is one of the reasons we did the shots in jeans too, along with our main shots. Is just kind of I always think about your subject and keep them comfortable. That's important.
So this is one example where you get to go to a private island in the Caribbean, and that's all nice. This next photo, though, is, underneath a highway, um, and you still made a great photo out of it.
Yeah, this goes back to what we were talking about a couple of minutes ago in terms of knowing what you can do in the time you've got. So this is a portrait of Darius Rice for ESPN the magazine, and this was an instance where I knew I would have exactly an hour with him. And again, I could have shot on campus, and it would have been, he probably would have been bored shooting in his gym after 15 minutes anyway, so I would have lost him. But kind of had in the back of my mind this location of a basketball court underneath a freeway overpass that was about 20 minutes from campus. So did the math and figured it would take him 40 minutes round trip, and I'd have 20 minutes to do this and the type portraits. And it actually totally paid off because he showed up, and this is the first shot we did, and he loved it, and we ended up probably getting 45 minutes with him. So I didn't really lose any time in transit anyway.
And when you scouted out this location, I guess you had it in your mind that there would be some big softbox illuminating him as well as something illuminate the backboard in the background there.
Yeah, usually I kind of try to think through how I'm gonna light things, what the light's gonna be like at the time. It's generally best if you can scout close to the time of day that you're shooting, and I think we were fairly close, so I knew that it was going to be pure shadow underneath, and it actually the lighting is two different hard lights, just basic um, Profoto's Magnum reflector, which is like a 12-inch um, reflector, just one hard light lighting him from the left, and then a second one just out of the frame to the right, with a grid on it aimed up at the basket. Um, that's just sort of a personal choice that I wanted the basket to read in the background. I didn't want it just to be a silhouette, so
Right.
I knew I had to light that as well.
So this is a good point since we have this kind of blue sky and we have this really orange outfit to sort of talk about color fidelity and where that fits into your workflow. How do you maintain consistency across, different camera bodies and different shoots and et cetera?
Well, I think the important thing is to always kind of have a base to work with. Even though I'm ultimately very rarely going with, you know, standard pure 6,000 daylight. It's being able to neutralize stuff and then decide what look you want to give it is a great step. So whenever I'm shooting in different lighting situations, I'll shoot a test with my ColorChecker Passport, which gives me not only a gray strip to calibrate from, but you also get all the color patches and stuff. So you can, if you so choose, you can create a custom profile for that particular light and lens and modifier. Because I shoot with the same Profoto lights almost all the time. I have kind of can profiles for the zoom and magnum reflectors, a different one for the white beauty dish, a separate one for the silver beauty dish, and then I'll have profiles for the octabanks with and without the diffusion in front. But if you want to get really, really specific, you just at the start or the end of the shoot, when you get the lighting the way you want, you shoot a picture of that profile. And then that, once you're back in the studio, gives you the opportunity to completely neutralize the color, and then from there decide if you want to make it a little bit warmer or colder. Typically, most of the color adjustments I do are toward warm and cool. Very rarely am I trying to add green or magenta to a shoot. So that's
Hmm.
really the value of having color calibration, is it will give you that neutral look right at the very start.
And is it fair to say that you are not kind of a heavy retoucher of the images? I mean, things look real. They don't have this kind of painterly effect to them.
Yeah, I'm pretty light-handed. I think some of the things people think that I do in post were actually done in the scene. For instance, the way of getting that blue sky really, really dark is the fact that it was, the entire scene was underexposed, and then the strobe opened up um, the, uh, the basketball player in the hoop. If I'd open up for that, trying to bring that blue back is, then it becomes a big chore. But, sometimes you can save yourself a lot of post work by, just thinking in advance and getting it right to begin with.
That's such an old school mentality to get right in the camera, Brian.
Well, I'm old school, Alan.
So this looks like another kind of middle of the day, but you underexpose the background and expose him properly.
Exactly. So this portrait of Jeff Gordon is shot out in Homestead Racetrack in Florida, and we were, sort of mid-morning. This is probably that 11 a.m. in Florida, where, you know, the the light is not as soft as it could be, but the clouds are beautiful. So, in addition to the daylight striking him, the actual main light is a big octabank off to the right side of the frame, illuminating him, but also kind of backlighting that racing flag in the foreground. Sometimes people look at this and it's like, how many lights? And it's one. It's kind of, the flag's closer, so it becomes backlit, whereas he's kind of side lit. And then the other thing, just sort of paying attention on the shot to what is going on in the scene, kind of going back to those days of photojournalism where you notice what's happening. I'm creating this entire thing, but I noticed as we're shooting that his tie's kind of flapping around in the wind, and I love the way that it looks. So I had the stylist pin his tie in position, so suddenly it's flapping in the breeze constantly, and then it's not a case of trying to wait for that moment where the tie is just perfect. It's I'm completely concentrating on Jeff and his expressions.
When we looked at the start, and we were looking at the Nepalese holy men, and you said, you often have an opportunity nowadays with digital to show them the images as you're moving along. How often when you're dealing with celebrities are you actually showing them images as you're shooting?
It kind of varies. I'm a big believer. Pretty much the monitor and um, tech doesn't really come out unless we've got art directors on the shoot and everybody needs to see it, and it just slows things down.
Yeah.
It's so much easier a lot of times where you're just shooting, sort of like the good old days of film where you go through a roll and then you stop and pause a little bit. And if you see something, once you hit something you really like, a lot of times I'll show the subjects, so, just to kind of give them an idea what the shot looks like. Sometimes this gives them a good idea in terms of they weren't expecting to see, this much background in this. So it's a good way to kind of get people on your side. I just don't like it when it becomes the thing where that's really all you're doing and you've got 15 people clustered over a monitor.
Right, right. Um, Seeing the world from a new perspective, obviously the first point is key. The vantage point can have a huge impact on your photos. How do you approach, this idea that you need the safe photo? How much experimentation are you trying to do after you get the safe photo?
As much as I possibly can with the time that I've got. I could have anything from 5 minutes to an hour with most of the people that I shoot, and a lot of times it tends to be with the when you've got an hour with somebody, your direction is just do whatever you want. Whereas when you've got 5 minutes, they're expecting three situations in that 5 minutes. So there's very little experimentation at that point, but very often I'll come in with kind of a plan of what I want to do, but if the subject takes me in a different direction, I roll with it. And I think some of my favorite pictures have happened because I've, you know, gone in with a plan and then thrown the plan out the window when the subject had a better idea.
When you're getting a brief from a photo editor on an editorial job, for example, how specific are they in terms of what they're trying to capture?
It really, really, really varies. Like the ideal thing that all of us love to hear is just do your thing. Like, we want a portrait, do your thing, and that actually comes along. That's kind of the perfect scenario, and it gives you the freedom of sort of like, you know, I guess in a way it puts the pressure on you, like, you can do anything you want, so don't screw it up. But I always love that because that gives me the idea that I'm hired to do what I love to do. On other situations, particularly covers, it's really broken down into terms of sometimes nothing other than we need the subject on the right so the text can go on the left, and make sure you leave room for our logo at the top. And
Hmm.
it's kind of, you've got this parameter in terms of know where you've got. And then sometimes I'll on cover shoots I may even get a sketch as a starting point, so I've kind of got an idea. And then finally, there's other shoots that will literally be a shopping cart list of all the shots you've got to do in whatever time you've got. So you're kind of cranking through all those things and hoping that at the end you can carve out enough time to do something you really want to do.
And this last point here in regards to varying options and you might sell more images, is this the case where they're hiring you to say shoot a cover but they say, hey, we like these other images as well, we'll use them inside of the magazine and here's more money? Or is it they're coming back to you later on and saying, hey, we like some of those outtakes?
Well, at the very start, it's like whenever you go out and do a shoot, almost every editor is expecting 3 or 4 options out of that shoot. I mean, I've literally had the phone call before when I had absolutely no time with the subject, and we did one setup. I've gotten the phone call, you know, we love the photograph. It's absolutely perfect. Where's the rest of the stuff? It doesn't matter what happens. They are going to expect multiple options.
Right.
Sometimes it's as simple as having another shot for the jump of the story. Sometimes you want to give them a picture for table of contents, and other times, who knows? It's like an image could be slated for a tiny picture inside, and you end up with enough great images that even the story wasn't going to be a lead story. But I have had times that, because they love the photographs, it elevated to a big feature, or sometimes even landed a cover for something that originally was slated as a quarter page department shot. So you always want to come away with the most variety you possibly can.
This is kind of a lower vantage point of Gene Hackman talking about getting the right vantage point, new perspective.
Yeah, and this is also an example of what we are just talking about. This was from a cover shoot of Cigar Aficionado, and you kind of have to start off the day knowing that they want a tight portrait of a face for their cover. So we did quite a few of those images pretty quickly. Did a couple changes, couple different backgrounds, shot him both against canvas and then also on location with like a blue pool water behind it. But I had seen this really funky, oversized chess set at the hotel where he was staying, and just thought, that's really cool and that's kind of different. So, you know, let me make sure that I work that shot in. So this is shot from a very, very low angle to make the chess pieces in the foreground seem even more exaggerated. And he had fun with it. Gene's actually got a marvelous sense of humor, and he thought it was he thought the perspective was pretty cool and it was fun. And this ended up being the opening shot for the article. So it's that extra thing that they don't ask for that you look for.
What's your typical crew for a shoot like this? Is there a stylist and a makeup person and a lighting assistant?
It really varies depending on budget. For this, the budget was pretty decent, so we had a stylist and a groomer for him. Typically for men, a groomer can handle both, you know, hair and very light makeup. A lot of times it's really powder or just making everything look good.
Hmm.
And then a stylist with wardrobe. I think we used some of his, and then stuff we brought as well. And then I honestly do not remember if I had one or two assistants on this shoot. Might have been two. It used to be almost a given on cover shoots that you would always have a budget for at least 2 to 3 assistants, and now more and more magazines are tightening the belt. So it's, can you get by with one? And typically, you know, I, I'm never afraid to pick up a pack on my own. So if it comes down to that, I'd rather make sure that I've got the stylist and groomer than, um, you know, than keeping myself from being there helping the
Right.
assistant move lights.
Um, I always refer to this guy as the guy from American Pie because I can never remember his name. I think
Ah,
that's the guy from
Jason
American Pie. Uh,
Jason Biggs. Um,
Biggs? Dates
Jason
Biggs?
Biggs,
Something like
yes,
that?
yes, Jason Biggs. Yeah, Jason was really really a lot of fun, and this was a portrait for a beer magazine that I shoot for a lot, Draft, and um, kind of we did our location scouting via via Google, finding this kind of funky bar with a lot of character because I thought it'd be fun. I thought it'd be fun for him. Our models. The nearest butt hovering right over him is our art director Kevin Robbie, doing his part for our shoot, and then the other two models on the far end cost us a grand total of 1 beer apiece. So yes, you still can find excellent talent in Los Angeles at a good price. And then Jason had a big laugh out of this whole shoot. I think it had something to do with seeing someone lower themselves to the level of an American Pie actor or something like you
Right,
said. So.
right. So was this the safe shot, or was this something you walked in and you said, "I like that quilted padding on the side of the bar. Let's get Jason down there for a different perspective."
Well, we you know at the time we did about 2 years of their covers and interior shots, so it's kind of anything I can do to give a shot a different twist instead of one more shot of the guy sitting at a bar or cocktail table. So I'm always looking for something funky, and yeah, the kind of quilted aqua, um, wonderful original Naugahyde fabric just caught my eye.
And when you walk into a situation, I know you were looking for kind of a funky bar, um, but having shot so many portraits, do you ever panic about what you're going to do on the next portrait to be original or something?
Yeah, I mean it's like sometimes you come into these things, and I mean that's probably one of the reasons that I kind of look for these funky or weird locations, because it's, I if you're in a real generic office setting sort of thing, it's like it can tend to look like the same hallway after the same hallway after the same hallway. So I'm kind of always drawn to things a little bit more unusual. But that panic is not, it's nothing to be afraid of. That's just creativity screaming in the back of your head and trying to get out.
For the outdoor shots that we've seen, the Darius Rice, even the Gene Hackman, how often are you going out and getting location permits to do these shoots?
Pretty much never permits. We do get permission from the location. For Gene, it was a piece of cake because he was staying there, and that's kind of the one trick whenever you're photographing celebrities. If you want to photograph them at the hotel where they're staying, the hotels are almost always absolutely delighted because they know that some part of their location will end up with a famous celebrity in a magazine. So
Hmm.
that's that's about the easiest thing to do. I think with now with Darius, I did pull a permit because we were on at a city park. So I just pulled it with the I think it was city of Miami or something like that. So
Hmm.
you pretty much want to figure out if there's a decent chance that a cop's going to drive by in the time that you're shooting, you got to have a permit.
Um, so we have a few questions, and I think they're commenting on sort of the vibrance of the color here, but a lot of people are asking whether you use HDR, high dynamic range photography.
I do not use HDR at all. This particular one that we've got right here is probably, um, I guess it might be what you call faux HDR, which in Lightroom is just kind of opening up the shadow values a little bit.
Hmm.
If you go too far, it kind of looks like really really bad HDR. But instead, here's kind of an instance that I wanted a little bit more of the detail in the blacks to open up. So I probably pumped in about 20 points on that just to open it up a bit.
Yeah,
Typically though, I'm going more the other extreme where I'm embracing the shadows instead of trying to open them up.
gotcha. Pose, gesture, and emotion. I shoot a lot against seamless when I try to be a portrait photographer, and I think capturing people against white seamless versus sort of an environmental portrait is so difficult.
Yeah, it's definitely more to me. I have to agree, it's a lot more difficult. Where that's one of the things that if it really is an opportunity to pick a background that says somebody think about the person, it just gives you so much to play with. When you know when you are working against a solid background, the upside though to look at it is along with the difficulty that you mentioned, the other trade-off that you've got is suddenly you've got a chance to really really put the person center stage and make this really about their expression and the interaction that you bring out. So, you're no longer worried about what's going on in the background, what's going to pop up here or there, or how to do the light the next shot. You're pretty much set to go, and it really just is on making that connection with your subject and bringing out some emotion.
When you're photographing someone, and obviously everyone has different shaped faces and features, and some people are very thin, and some people have a little extra weight. Are you very conscious as you're shooting to say this person has to jut their chin out to remove the double chin, or I need to be a little bit higher on an angle, or is it very natural for you at this point?
I think that's one of those things. It's that almost you you want to get to the point where you know all of those techniques but can forget about them. Like you need to understand all the things that you can do, but they need to be so second nature to you that you're not stopping to delay and think about it. You're just doing it. So a lot of times on the shoots, some people look good no matter what you do with the lighting. Other times it's you're kind of crafting it a little bit to make the lives look the best. And
Yeah.
then okay, so we jumped over here to one of my favorite pictures of Richard Schiff and Peter Gallagher. That really is 100% emotion. It's I did an entire book, Art and Soul, where the lighting probably didn't change more than you know 6 inches one way or the other. We always kept the light from the same side and a fill, so it really was not about the light, same background on everything, but it gave us the opportunity to concentrate on emotion. And one of the things that you also want to do is you want to make the entire shoot experience fun for your subject. And it's like when you think about it, a lot of people really dread being photographed. So anything that you can make it do to make it, oh, I don't know, maybe a little less horrible is a good thing. So um, we had photographed Richard in LA for the book Art and Soul, and he was having so much fun that when everybody else came in, he posed with him, and I realized Richard pretty much knows everybody in Hollywood because like the next guy in was Dule Hill, who he was in West Wing with, and everybody seems to know Richard. And then, you know, at one point he says, this is really fun. Do you mind if I call? I was golfing with somebody this morning. You might mind if I call him in? And it's like sort of like, sure, Richard, just invite your caddy while you're at it. And 15 minutes later, his golfing buddy Peter Gallagher shows up. So the joke was completely on me. He's completely wired in, and this is just kind of one of the shots we did right as Peter showed up. So you always kind of want to watch for those things.
What to appease all the gear questions we're getting, what sort of camera are you using, and what was the lighting kit for this for these images?
Oh, sure. I mean, it's easy because we shot the same all the way through. This is the Sony Alpha 900. It was Sony's first full frame sensor camera. They have just released the A99, but these were all shot with the A900 and my favorite lenses that they make, which are two of their Zeiss lenses, the CZ 24 to 70 2.8 and the 85-1.4. And both of the lenses not only are like incredibly sharp, but just have a really nice color fidelity to them. So they're my favorite portrait lenses, and I actually tend to shoot more often with 70 millimeter than 85, because a lot of times for the tight portraits, I love being just a little bit closer to the subject than kind of the traditional 85, 100, 135.
And that's a function of the look, or you just like being physically closer to have more rapport with the subject?
It's both. It in terms of the look, it lends the image a little bit less flattened, so the face has a little bit of roundness to it, but not as round as you would be if you went in, real tight with a normal 50 millimeter lens.
Yeah.
So I just like the kind of intimate feel that it gets, but it also keeps you close, where you're kind of, you know, having a quiet conversation with your subject instead of shouting directions from across the studio with the 200 millimeter lens. And then in terms of lighting, all these are lit with the same setup, a Profoto Beauty Dish, a 22-inch white round reflector with a grid on it to kind of focus it almost like a spot, and then a fill right behind camera, just to open up the shadows a touch.
They're such lovely, lovely portraits. I guess the question I would have is, I've always contended, well, if you gave me a supermodel to photograph, then I could take a nice photo of a supermodel. These images have such great character. Is it easier to work with actors versus like a businessman, like a CEO guy?
Well, I mean, speaking of supermodels, I mean, Bill Macy is a supermodel. I mean, let's just acknowledge that right there.
Yes.
This is, yeah, this is Bill jumping over to an advocacy campaign for WWE and the Creative Coalition, the Be a Star anti-bullying campaign, and Bill showed up with a Band-Aid on his nose and was about to take it off, and he said, "No, this is probably a good thing for anti-bullying." So it's, you know, he's a dream subject and supermodel.
Yes.
But yeah, I think there's something in terms of I love actors, particularly character actors, because they play along, they play a part. Comedians as well, and you can just really have a lot of fun with them. CEOs is typically a different approach where you have to direct them more. It's not necessarily one is better than the other. It's just one takes more direction than the other.
Yeah. Yeah. We were talking about the Art and Soul book that you produced, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about the whole notion of color calibration. We talked about, using the ColorChecker Passport. What sort of tools are you using on the desktop to ensure that what you're seeing on the screen is what you're getting in the book?
Yeah, so that's the next part in the whole equation. It's so when you're shooting, you start off with a color checker, so you've got something to calibrate from. But just as important is you have to have your computers calibrated to um, you know an industry standard. So when I'm going between my MacBook Pro on the road and um, my desktop at home with a 30-inch monitor, typically those things right out of the box, the color would be all over the place, and my editor, if they weren't color calibrated, would have something totally different. So the idea is if everybody calibrates, then the images that I'm working on um, will match what I see in production. And because X-Rite's really the industry standard, throughout the entire process of printing the book, the great situation would be I would the images that I worked on in the and handed off from my computer. The first time I saw them as proofs was up in New York, and they're looking at proofs under you know neutral color balance, and we're able to evaluate how it's printed close to that, and everything was like within a couple points. So that's why, unless you have the option, if you're shooting for a publication, you can actually afford to send everybody a a laptop balanced to your specifications. You've got to go with color calibration. So
Right.
so I
So,
use the one that I use the most often, since it came out is the i1 Display Pro 2,
mhm.
because the i1 Display Pro is small enough that it will fit in a bag with me, and I've literally been on the road on this. In fact, in the middle of this project, had some type of operating system crash on my Mac and had to completely reinstall the operating system. And once you do, all those wonderful profiles that you had are out the window. So I'm in the middle of New York, and I love those computers, but they actually come out from factory default kind of blue and too contrasty. But
Yeah.
just plug in the Display Pro, run a quick calibration, and now I know as I'm looking at it is back to what I've calibrated in the studio, and everything's going to match up and make sense, when I hand the files off too.
And that I1 Display Pro is it's a pretty small unit, right? So you just throw it in your bag while you're traveling, and you can be on an
Absolutely.
airplane
I
and
mean,
you
that's one
have
of
it
the good
calibrated.
things too. It's small enough you never leave it behind, and that's
Yeah.
kind of the key. Is it's like smaller than a light meter, and I take it on the road, both to calibrate projection when I'm speaking, but also you know um, to recalibrate when I've it's time to recalibrate, or if I have a system crash, that gets me up right away with consistent color.
Seeing the light, you use a whole bunch of different modifiers from softboxes to magnum reflectors to beauty dishes. Do you sort of approach every shoot kind of knowing the quality of light that you're looking for, or is that something you kind of decide when you get to the location?
Sometimes I'll go in and I kind of have a feel for the shoot, like I know what I want to say about it. And then other times it's kind of a case of like, how do I make this scene look right? It's kind of a mixture of the two, whether it's it's just the right lighting for the subject and the scene, or if it is a mood you're trying to create.
And we saw each other in Seattle at the APA photo assistant seminar, and you talked about using strobed light kind of to make it look like it was daylight, and being sort of directional in the same way as sunlight was streaming through a window. Is that something that you're kind of keenly aware of when you're creating a photo?
Yeah, I think that's one of the big things to look at is, you know, at least be aware of what natural light would do. Like a lot of times, I don't want the images to scream exactly, that they were lit. I just want it to look like I happen to be the lucky guy who actually got to shoot at, you know, 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning instead of shooting at noon. So it you
Right.
kind of take those keys, like if you see hard sunlight streaming through a window, but it's going about 4 inches because light's almost overhead. It if you want to replicate that, you go with a direct reflector, like a hard reflector or something, as opposed to a big softbox. So kind of, if you want something to look like, you know, daylight, you work with that. So here's our color checker passport. We were talking about that earlier, so you
Hmm.
can see. We'll just blast off a frame before we get started.
And is this from the burlesque images that you shot?
Yes, this is the lovely burlesque dancer Gal Friday. We did this actually for an X-Rite video that's still floating around there on the web somewhere under color and burlesque. So first thing we do is kind of do color calibration, and then that's gonna stay the same as long as I keep the lighting the same. So
Hmm.
that's one of the things. It's like this really doesn't take that long as we move different performers in there. If I'm keeping the lighting the same, I don't have to recalibrate every time. The lights will stay consistent.
I got to tell you, I used the color checker passport this morning for a portrait shoot, and I don't know. There's, I take the image into Lightroom. I use the white balance eyedropper, and the subtlety that you get off of those different gray patches, it just really can neutralize the color and then bias the color. How you were saying before, it makes such a nice difference.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times one of the things it teaches you when you see what a subtle difference is, you might be talking 5 points one way or another, and
Yeah.
going back and forth on your own, going, a little too magenta, no, a little too green now. It's like you waste all this time, and it's so much easier with the eyedropper just to neutralize it and then figure out what the heck you want to do.
Here's a lovely image, and I think we had a question before too in regards to how often are you forcibly changing the white balance and then gelling the light. So in this
That's
case,
a
it looks
gr-
like The background's very, very blue.
That's a great question. So actually, in this instance, this is shot at dusk as the sun is going down, and the sky in the background was actually gray as could be to your eye. However, as the light goes down, the color balance actually changes. It gets a gray sky gets bluer as it gets darker and darker, and you get that last little bit of daylight out there. So here's an instance. If I was using auto white balance, the camera would probably correct for me and make those gray clouds look gray just like they're supposed to, but that's not really what I want here. We're just really locking down our exposure, either by calibrating or setting it at you know if you even just set the color for daylight balance, you'll see this happens. And then, so that's the blue that you see in the background for lighting. This is a portrait of Alejandro Sanz. He's a Spanish Grammy-winning singer, and I just wanted the light on him to kind of go the other direction. So as the background's going blue, we've got a big octabank off to the left, and it's lit with, it's got like a 1/2 tungsten conversion gel over the light. So it's halfway to what would be tungsten looking light, and that kind of keeps it warm on him while the background's going blue. And I think a lot of times you kind of give it these nice light sources, where it's kind of the warm and cold, just like highlights and shadows, working with warm and cold. And the look that I wanted for this is I wanted this to look like that. I had that wonderful last beam of sunlight hitting him. Of course, I couldn't do that because the sun had actually set behind the trees in the background. I just wanted to look like, the sun was setting off to the left, and, just kind of caught him with the last bit of daylight.
And how do you convince a Grammy Award winner to go into a pool with his clothes on?
That was an interesting thing. They did, when we showed up for the shoot, they took us to a room with two gold records on the wall that he did all of his interviews and all his photos in. And, it was fine, but particularly, nothing really fascinating. So I just asked if I could look around, and the house was great. There were all these different spots. I came back to his manager and gave him a list of all the stuff I wanted to do. He said, great. So we shot him against his white grand piano. We shot him upstairs with his artwork. I shot him actually painting, shot him out in front, and we'd done all these pictures, and I kind of had in the back of my mind, for the very last shot, I wanted him in the pool. And of course, big tip right here, if you plan on getting your subject soaking wet, save that for your last shot. And I also, the timing was going to be about right, where I was also knew I was going to get this beautiful dusk picture. And by the time we'd done all this stuff, we'd done 5 pictures already that are completely different than anything he'd ever done before, locations he'd never posed. So he's having a good time. So literally, I was starting to, explain, saying, at the end of this shot, I'd love to get you in the water when I heard a splash, because it was like he was ready. He was he was so into it at this point. Like, boom, in the water, there he goes. So
That's funny.
we didn't waste the time on those pictures leading into it. Went straight for this.
All right, this next guy's one of my favorites. I mean, Christopher Walken is so weird. I just saw a movie preview with him, and he's just such a funny guy. Tell us about this one.
Chris is indeed a very unique talent and a absolutely spectacular face. So, here's an instance where, I really don't need that much of a background around him, other than this is a canvas backdrop behind him with a tungsten light aimed at it, and I just want to come in tight on this face.
And we've had a couple comments in regards to like why this specific pose for this specific person. He's not looking at the camera. He's kind of looking, down. You have this kind of background that's on fire. Was there something specific you had in mind for this?
I think like in general, I think looking into the camera is kind of overrated. So it's like I do an awful lot of shots of people, looking off. And I think a lot of times actors really kind of like that because it is more a case where they can drop into character as opposed to, staring at the camera and smiling, which it's like, you know, just do something different. But it also depends. Like he just had such a marvelous face for looking off that it seemed kind of cool.
Yeah. Uh, Now, this next image, I know that you showed up in around noon for this shoot, but you didn't actually get to actually shoot them until midnight. So talk
Yeah,
about changing lighting situations.
yeah, it was very close to that, very close to that. The For those of you who've never done a hip hop shoot, there's something called a call time. And the call time is the time that you're expected to show up and guaranteed that you will never, ever, 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 ever have to photograph a portrait at the call time. It's sort of the call time is kind of a guideline for when a picture is not going to happen. And it was not quite as bad as noon, but I do think it was about 4 o'clock. And I even questioned it because it was Vibe magazine, and it's kind of like, yeah, when are we really getting this? And they said, no, no, you'll get it right away. You're the priority. You're the most important person. This photo is their priority for the whole day. You're the most important thing they're doing. And it's like you just know you are never the most important thing when you're doing a photograph, particularly
Right.
when there's a video involved of anybody. So we got there at 4 o'clock, and actually some of the cars were there, which was kind of cool. It's kind of scouting around thinking. I think the production I kept hearing from the publicist that they're 5 minutes away. I think for close to 3 hours, and then they did finally show up. Started rolling. It was getting dark, and of course at that point they're really rushing to get the video in, and then this picture is shot about probably a good 8 hours into my day at a couple minutes after midnight. They finally wrapped the production, and at this point, I'll be honest that um, even the director and DP were feeling kind of bad for me because they'd seen me standing around all day. So they're like, whatever you need, it's all yours. And I'm like, just don't turn off your lights. So this is a case of sort of blending strobe lights on them with all the lights from the ambient light in the city in the background, as well as the video lights that were there. So you want to use every light that's possibly available.
So I mean, we've seen it in some of the other images as well, but you often will drag the shutter for, a second or more to get the ambient to kind of bleed through.
Yeah, so this is locked down um, on a tripod. This is I do remember very clearly this was a 1 second exposure, probably around 11 and a half or so. And I put them in a spot that they would be pretty much in silhouette if I didn't light them. So that's kind of a clue. It's like you don't have to worry about the guys, getting too much movement out of your subject if you put them where they're not lit. And then this is they're lit with a single beauty dish and a grid just kind of, aimed enough from the side where it would just look like one more light from production.
And the yellow smoke off to the left there, is that just dust being kicked up?
Um, yeah, that was an instance where I got kind of a cooler shot than the video did because
Right.
they had all this backlight going on, but it really wasn't until everybody was hightailing out of there and were kicking up all this dust that suddenly, I got the cool background out of that.
That's awesome. And our last image here, great black and white shot, wonderful light.
Yeah, this is kind of an example of, okay, so we've talked about all these things about how you light it and how you create light, but one of the most important things to do is to recognize really, really beautiful light when it happens. So this portrait of a restaurant owner, Sharif Melnick, and I had, the entire thing set up, lit, ready to go, and then right as he arrived and as they're doing, little light grooming on him, all of a sudden the sun comes out, pops through the glass block windows, and for about 5 minutes we get this beautiful light streaming through um, into the studio. So we just positioned the background and put him in this light, forgot, at that point we forgot about all the light we set up and just took advantage of this.
And are these V flats? I mean, it's not like a
Yeah.
slate wall or anything. They're just V
Yeah,
flats.
no, this is just foam core V flat, or walls where you want them.
Amazing, amazing. So I should let everyone know that Brian has just published a book called Secrets of Great Portrait Photography. I ordered my copy from Amazon and I got it last week, and it's fantastic. So there's, I know a lot of people want to see more images, and I can assure you there are a ton of images in there. You can also get it from your website, Brian, briansmith.com/books.
Yeah, we have all the links to the book right there, so that will link you to all the different books we've got out.
And tell us about all the speaking that you're doing in the next week. So you're at Photo Plus.
Yeah, I sort of feel like all I'm missing is the Paramus Mall, but I'm starting off next Monday the 22nd at 6 p.m. at the Apple Store Soho. Then Tuesday at SVA from 12 to 2 o'clock for an APA advocacy talk for those of you who want to find out about licensing your work and copyright. If you happen to be in New York City, we're doing that. And then Friday of next week from 4 to 6, I'm going to be doing a talk specifically on lighting, kind of based on the book it will be Secrets of Great Portrait Lighting at the Photo Plus Expo. And pretty much all the rest of the time during Photo Plus, I will be at the Sony booth Thursday, Friday, Saturday, whenever I'm not doing the expo talk. And then finally, on Monday the 29th at the B&H Photo Event Space, and then back down to Miami for a gallery opening. So
Exactly. So definitely, if y'all are in New York or coming for Photo Plus, make sure you check out any one of those Brian events. We should also let you know, and maybe Brenda can talk about this, but X-Rite has some rebates for you in regards to these two products here, and we've talked about them both, and I own both, so I'm super excited to actually be part of this. Brenda, go ahead, Brenda.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, we're going to send you emails that have these rebate certificates attached. So if you're interested in either one of these, and actually this is happily incorrect because the rebate for i1 Display Pro is actually $50. So you'll be getting that in the next couple of days. Thanks a lot, folks.
And this ColorChecker Passport is not an expensive item for what you get. So, if nothing else, I really strongly encourage you guys to get that. I should also let you know about our next webinar, which is happening during Photo Plus. It's with Dan Milner, who's the photographer in residence at Blurb, who's going to talk about creating picture books and creating stories and narratives when you create your photo books. So we hope you can join us for that. But Brian, thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to seeing you next week and seeing you down in Miami in a few weeks.
always a pleasure, Alan. Thank you very much for having me on.
And thanks to the audience for joining us today. As we mentioned before, this recording will be up hopefully later today. I might have started it maybe 2 minutes late after we started, so there might be a little bit missing, but all the good stuff is there, I promise. But please join us next time and visit us at our blog, photoshelter.com, blog.photoshelter.com, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.